Well, hello, everybody. This is another Peak Careers interview, and today we're going to be looking at post-pandemic impact on jobs. And I'm fortunate to have David DeLong, president of Smart Workforce Strategies, with us today. What we're going to play around with is what are the trends that he's seen in the workplace now, and what can career coaches do to help their clients navigate their job search. So David helps leaders identify practical solutions to critical skill shortages and workplace challenges. He's the president of Smart Workforce Strategies, and his research really focuses on solutions for major changes in workforce demographics, shifts in generational values, and implementing new technologies. And I'm excited to have David here today. Actually, I met David at Colby when I was helping Colby College out, and you came in and did I think a workshop for us and helped us out in the Career Center. So nice to see you, David, and thanks so much for carving some time out today.
It's great to be with you, Jim.
So let's jump in. What are the trends that you're seeing in the workforce now? And this is based, we've been a year now locked down. It's hard to believe, but what are you seeing for trends? We're going to come out of this. I mean, we're coming out of this, and what's going on?
We are. Well, thanks for having me today. There are a number of things. I've been doing interviews, I call it my listening tour, the last year with executives as much as possible, try and understand, and other leaders in the workforce space, if you will, trying to understand the changes that we're experiencing and how to make sense of what's happening. And one of the things I did as we started to see the end of the pandemic, with the arrival of a vaccine, and that's all got its own set of challenges. But what I did is I went back and looked at World War II, the transition out of World War II from a wartime to a peacetime economy, because that was the closest thing I could find to an event that had such a dramatic impact countrywide. And I looked at some of the lessons that we can draw from that transition in World War II. And there are four that I found that are relevant today coming out. The first is the notion of prosperity and suffering coexisting. In December 1944, the third year after the third anniversary after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. was still deeply involved in World War II, and yet Macy's set a record in terms of shopping sales in New York City. And what that showed is, we still had a big part of the war to come. There were still the Battle of the Bulge, Battle of Okinawa. We're going to kill over 30,000 US soldiers, but people were shopping. And
amazing.
Yeah, what this showed is this great tension between desire for prosperity and returning to normal, and yet the fact that people were still suffering. And so one of the takeaways from that for me was, you're going to have to, when we come out of these transitions, unfortunately, there are people still suffering, and there's a great desire to move on. And there are people who are actually prospering, who are doing fine. Yeah. So one of the keys for you as a career counselor, or whatever your role is in workforce development, is to be aware of this sort of coexistence of some people are doing great and moving on, and there's this suffering that's still existing. And what assumptions are you making about how we're going to come out of this? There are a lot of questions there. So that was number one. Number two is, after World War II, there were 12 million soldiers returning from war, and a lot of them had to go through a major mental health recovery time. And that's another thing that's going to be, it's already getting a lot of play in the press. And there's going to be, particularly for frontline workers and people who've had to work through the pandemic, there are a lot of people who've suffered and are going to need time to recover. And that might be you. So one of the things to be aware of is your own self-care and cutting yourself some slack, and your clients and the people you're working with and your colleagues, and recognize some people are going to really need intense mental health coaching, counseling, as they recover from the impacts the pandemic has had on their mental state. So that's number two. Number
So
three,
let me just mention that, like, so what clearly, with everybody sort of being encapsulated, I mean, there's a lot of mental health issues going on with folks. I mean, if they were stressed out before, going to work was their pressure point where they could get out of that, some of domestic abuse or whatever,
right.
But your point is well taken. The nurses who are pedal to the metal for a year, there's going to be a crisis with those people too coming out of this, right? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So it's not just the more obvious ones, but domestic abuse is being contained in a house, and it's a pressure. We got nurses who are pedal to the metal, doctors that as frontline people who've been freaked out.
Right, and they've been forced to go to work to make a living, or because their job, like as you say, in healthcare. And one of the things that this is going to do is it's going to lead to some early retirements.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see people, and I'm seeing it already, in their 50s, or 60s, who are saying, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Or I'm never going back to the office. I've experienced working from home.
Right.
And I'm not going to go back.
Right.
And then second, they're just people who are just burned out and saying, I've had enough. I can't take this anymore.
Right. It's the tipping point for them.
Right. And so that's going to create some challenges in organizations where those experienced people were expected to stay longer, going to be losing their knowledge and capabilities and expertise quicker than you thought before they have a chance to train the next generation. So that's going to be a significant issue in certain fields.
Yep.
And it always comes down to individuals. It's very, very, you're going to hear me say this a couple of times. It's very contextual, very much depends on the situation.
Yeah.
The third trend I saw is women at the end of World War II. Millions of women went into the workforce in World War II.
Right.
The Rosie the Riveter is the prototypical iconic symbol of that, of women who were called in to do wartime jobs when men went off to fight. Well, when those men came back, those women were laid off. Women paid a huge, even though they wanted to keep working, they laid them off to make room for men, returning soldiers, to give them jobs. Well, women are again paying a huge price in this pandemic. As you know, 800,000 women have already left the workforce last year. And a McKinsey study showed that 2 million women are thinking about leaving or ratcheting back their careers. So there's just an unbelievable impact on women because of the childcare issues that have come up, and the childcare infrastructure that's been devastated by the pandemic. So many centers have closed. So one of the issues, again, going forward, is you're going to have to look at, for yourself, obviously your own childcare needs, if those are relevant for you at your stage of life, and for your clients and the people you're serving. And so we're going to have to rebuild the childcare infrastructure. That's going to be a huge issue. And employers, so one of the things for working mothers, one of the things that you're going to be looking for is you're going to be looking for creative employers who are willing to address these childcare issues directly, and not skirt around them and leave them to the employees, just to make them the employees or the job candidates' problem. That's going to be a huge factor and something we need to anticipate and invest in.
So do you think some of these bigger companies are going to just start creating daycares?
Well, I think the smart ones, and may not just be big companies, maybe they've got to get creative in taking into account. There are so many women. The difference between World War II and today is women hold critical leadership roles and jobs that are high skill, high value. We can't work, the society can't function without women in the workforce, skilled women in the workforce. So we have to figure this out. We have to find ways to be creative. And you want to look for employers who are thinking that way, and employers can actually gain competitive advantage by touting themselves and saying, look, we know this problem exists and we're going to work with you as a women candidate or a working father. They're both works both sides.
Right, but the pressure point is, what do I do with the kids? And and this is really highlighted. This pandemic has really highlighted as schools closed down, and when like, what am I? My wife was actually, we were actually, she would Zoom with the grandkids in Arizona to help them with the homework, so that Haley could actually get some work done at home. Right. I mean, she's got 2 kids in the house, a full-time job. She's got trying to do homework with these kids. And so, I mean, here's my wife, the grandmother, Zooming in and FaceTiming in and helping the grandkids out with homework. I mean, it's like, but not everybody had, that was a luxury.
Right. They had a resource of your wife. Yeah.
So daycare, that's very interesting. I mean, I just think that's gonna, we've always said, well, people will figure out daycare, but that's not that easy. And this has highlighted it for sure.
And I don't think you can push that. Employers can push that anymore onto job candidates and workers and just say it's their problem. It's such a big problem in certain contexts that it's going to need to be addressed by employers.
Interesting.
They're going to have to be creative in that regard. The fourth trend, if I may go on, is we've really lost a year of pre-employment training through the pandemic. All those internships, apprenticeships, plant tours, any kind of on-site face-to-face work with potential employees, students, has been gone and I see this in my interviews around the country, that schools have not been able to, in good conscience, obviously let their students out into programs, whether it's career awareness programs or, as I say, internships or apprenticeships, and employers haven't been wanting to take them in. And so this is something, again, we have to rebuild and look for incredibly creative ways of accelerating the development and training for this cohort of students, whether they're coming out of high school and going to work or ready to go to work, or coming out of college, or beyond, or in some kind of vocational tech training program. We're going to have to get creative about this. And after World War II, Congress passed the GI Bill, which allowed millions of returning soldiers to go back to school to train them. And if you think about it, this country would have been in a very different place in terms of its workforce if we hadn't underwritten the training of all those returning soldiers and prepared them to go into the labor force, and if we just let them drift back in after the war. But this was unbelievable benefit coming out of World War II. And it's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about, how we're going to reestablish those training pipelines and again, look for even more creative ideas on what to do.
And interesting, we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, is that, part of that training is the GI Bill was really geared toward 4-year colleges and stuff. But as I was telling you this morning, I was reading in Association of Training and Development, ATD magazine, that a lot of businesses are who used to look for the MBA training, that 4-year degree plus a master's degree in business. They're kind of going, that's not really serving our purposes anymore, or not as much. We're still going to always need people with MBAs. We're still going to need people with college degrees. What they're saying is, that 4 years of training. And if you think about technology, if I go to college in September, the technology that's going to exist in 4.5 years from now is going to be huge. And so this article was talking about the fact that a lot of businesses are now looking toward their trades and their professional association and credentials and, all kinds of stuff for training. So the GI Bill was really looking toward that 4-year degree. What are you kind of seeing going on for training? What any recommendations, any thoughts on the training in reaction to that?
Sure. Well, again, it's going to depend on the field. But I was interviewing the CEO of a major workforce development agency in Boston this week, and he was talking to me about how they do a lot of work in healthcare, as you can imagine, in Boston. And they have become just a talent pipeline for employers. They go to employers and say, what roles are you trying to fill? It might be medical assistants, it might be surgical technicians, certain roles. And this agency is actually forcing employers to rethink their job requirements, because historically, some of these jobs, the employers would say, oh, the hospitals would say, oh, we need a 4-year degree, we need a bachelor's degree, and then we'll train people. Well, this agency went and looked at the jobs and really broke the jobs down and said, you don't need a 4-year degree to do this job. It's an animal technician in a research lab in healthcare, and you need a community college 2-year degree and a little experience here, and we can train you the other 2 months to be set up into this role.
Yeah.
And so we have to be much more discriminating about what the skills are that are actually needed, in jobs. And so, whether it's vocational trades, I mean, obviously those jobs, one of the things that's happening that's really fascinating, and I don't know if some of your subscribers are seeing this, but I've seen some vocational tech schools have become so competitive that they're out now taking mostly students, or majority of students, who are going on to 4-year colleges. And one of the things that's happening is young people who don't have a plan, or don't have the finances, or frankly the academic interest to go on to a 4-year college, are being squeezed out of the vocational tech system that historically was their route into employment. So this has created a whole new challenge for voc tech schools and for training those students who are coming out of school, out of high school without a plan. And so we have to find new paths and new ways to get these people ready.
Well, and I think, in Obama's administration, what community colleges really were raised up a lot higher. He was always talking about community colleges. And I think just these, like you say, these alternate pathways, whether it's vocational tech in the high school or community college, those are a lot of more short-term training. They can adjust to the marketplace. They can adjust, the workforce needs this. Well, we can tweak that. Where in a 4-year degree, it's more difficult to tweak, right?
Right, absolutely.
But you're buying a different product too. And I think to the point that you made about businesses need to look at what are the skills that they're developing. I mean, colleges need to look at what are the skills that we sell.
Right.
Why would you come to college? Well, a lot of it is that's analytical thinking. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to college, but it's not needed at every job, right?
Right. Absolutely. And what are those skills and how are they changing? You probably know, and who knows, maybe you've had someone on already talking about Colby has just gotten a huge grant donation. They're launching a whole data analysis major. They're bringing that into their educational system, the whole notion of artificial intelligence and using technology for the future. And they're recognizing, okay, liberal arts is changing and we better change with it. So that's just one example.
So we've got 2 more things I want to make sure we cover today. So one is, a lot of my audiences are the people who provide career services. So do you have any advice for career service providers? You've sort of woven in some, but I want to make sure I ask that question. And what advice do you have for people who are providing career services to folks in this day and age right now?
Sure. Well, the first thing to recognize is everything is contextual. And one of the huge challenges of doing research and counseling in this era, this pandemic, is it's made things even more fragmented, depending on the context. I mean, you have certain industries and employers that are just going gangbusters and are desperate for talent. They're really looking, right? But if you're in the hotel business or the restaurant business, it's going the other direction, or certain other sectors, particularly that require a lot of face-to-face interaction, the jobs have just dried up. So one of the things to be aware of is for you as a counselor to be aware and sensitive to the changing economy, and that some employers, as they say, are going to be are really anxious to see your candidates, and others just don't waste your time. So be sensitive to focus and coaching your clients or your students on how they focus, where they focus, where the growth areas are, and what areas may be going away. So that would be the first thing. The second would be getting experience in internships. Of course, a lot of your students or again, adults have been prevented in the last year from building their experience base because they just haven't been able to get it. So how do you get back into internships? And obviously there's some of this is virtual, and counselors know this because they've been dealing with it for the last year. But you may be asking your clients, and again, your students, how is your existing experience relevant to the future? One thing you want to coach people to do is to think about what they've been through in the pandemic and what they had done before, and how they can speak to potential employers about how what they've done in the last year and before is relevant going forward for the client. For example, I have a lot of experience working virtually or working remotely, and maybe the employer cares about that now when they didn't a year ago. So what is your relevant experience, and how can you build that faster? Are there any ways you can get an internship, even if it has to be virtual? Networking, is always critical, and that has to be done on Zoom a lot now. And one of the things that's relevant both for networking and selling yourself is to be coaching people on their online presence and presentation. I had to, always have to think. I'm actually, as I said to you, Jim, I'm speaking to you not from my office. So this is not a normal setting for me. I'm in Vermont today. But you have to think about your background, and particularly when you're dealing with younger students, and to be aware of the lighting. My wife is an executive in a nonprofit in Massachusetts, and we just bought a light for her to go on top of her computer to front light her a little bit, because you need to be very aware of how you present and how you're. Yeah. Right.
That's what I mean. Look how dark I am here. I bought it's a photographer.
Yeah, right.
It's an umbrella. It's a photographer umbrella that I put up here.
Good example. And my lighting right now isn't perfect, because again, I'm not in my normal setting, but you need to be very aware, and you can be coaching your students and your adult clients on this. They can't be dark, they have to look good on screen when they're doing those preliminary interviews, because so many nowadays are going to be done virtually, right? So selling yourself on Zoom, everybody is so distracted. Every employer is so distracted, so overwhelmed, every hiring manager. You have to expect disruptions. You have to coach your folks to expect disruptions, canceled interviews, rescheduled interviews. And I tell people, I've always coached people, the key to job search today is polite persistence. You have to never give up. You have to keep coming at, if you've emailed or contacted this candidate, and again, you're coaching people in doing this, but how do you coach them to not give up and not take, no response by email or voicemail as or text as a no interest? People may be very interested in you, but they just are overwhelmed. So
that's a great point. And it's just, our default as human beings is they didn't get back to me because they don't like me.
Right.
And the reality is, I love that. The polite persistence. I just think that's exactly what I'm telling people. Go back to the well. Go back and send them an email, But you got to do that in week 2. you can don't wait 2-3 months.
Right.
Right.
Wait a week.
That's the persistence part, right?
Right.
But you're also not going every single day, right?
Right.
Because then now it's not polite anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And I've had people I've talked to or given speeches over the year, and they've come back to me and says, David, I listened to you and I got a job because I was politely persistent. That's key. Just staying visible, like every once a week, or every 2 weeks, depending on the context.
Yep.
That's really, really important, because just realize people are so distracted. You know what your inbox is like. The emails come. You had to ask me a couple times to do this, right?
Yeah.
My intention was yes, but I just get other things come in and distract you. So, and the final piece is getting help. You can't do this alone. In all these areas we're talking about today, people need to reach out and know that people are interested in helping, and you want to encourage your clients to seek help and seek, whether it's from parents or just colleagues and friends. Just talk to people, let them know how you're experiencing things, and not beating a drum about it, but get help and ask for people's ideas. And so,
but listen, I'm very interested in your your book that's coming out. When we talked about it, I think in the fall, I might have started this conversation in the fall, and you wanted to do some more, get some more research done. But talk to us about this book. This is Building Tomorrow's Workforce in Today's Economy, I think was the title. And this is really, really good stuff. Let's just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I've been interested in the future of work and the future of the workforce for years. And as you know, I've written a series of books in this area, and people can get more information at my website, smartworkforcestrategies.com. But I've decided to focus this book on how we employ, what are euphemistically called marginalized populations of folks, because employers, the nature of changing demographics and the shrinking labor pool because of aging baby boomers and a lot of other factors in play, and frankly, the growth of the population in the United States, particularly, is small enough that we're not going to have the people we need to fill the jobs that we have in the next 3 decades. We have to find ways to leverage people who've been on the sidelines in the labor pool. That is economically disadvantaged folks, disabled folks, ex-offenders, homeless, all these groups, single mothers. We have to find ways to get these people in the workforce and in sustainable jobs. I don't mean low-level jobs. Right. And so my book is going to focus on stories of agencies and organizations, whether they're chambers of commerce, workforce development agencies, anybody who's working with these populations, and stories of success, of how they've worked with, addressed a particular problem for that agency. And from employers' perspectives, how employers have dealt with and found these resources. This is sort of overlooked talent. And because a lot of these people can turn out to be great employees, but there is a need for wraparound services, often maybe help with transportation, housing, certainly job skills training. And so I'm researching this book now. It'll come out early next year, and it'll be about building the future workforce, but particularly for this part of the population that's traditionally overlooked. So if you're someone who's working with these populations, and has had some success and is wrestling with these problems, I'd be happy to talk to you. Reach out to me through my website, and we'll schedule a call as part of my ongoing research. And I work nationally with all kinds of sites, chambers, people. I'm really interested in multi-stakeholder solutions, approaches to these problems.
Wow. Our country incarcerates more people than anyone else in the world. And then employers are saying, do you have a criminal record? And they're rejecting people. It's like, dude, we got all these people. A lot of them made a stupid mistake. And, some of them made really bad, a series of bad decisions. But I mean, there's a lot of good people that come out and go, you know what? I ain't going back there. but somebody's got to give me a chance, right? Somebody's got to help me make this move. That's just one of the marginalized groups that you talked about. And I think people, with mental illnesses and stuff, I mean, they've got it tough because sometimes they have a bad day, and then what do you do and how do you handle that? And,
Right. And it's challenging for employers. There's not easy answers, but there are employers who are getting the message. I wrote a piece on the Harvard Business Review blog recently about Greyston Bakery in Yonkers, New York, which has an open hiring policy. They hire off a list, no job interview, no resume, no drug test, and no background check. But they provide wraparound services, and they train their bakers, and they make all the brownies for Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and they have a very successful business. But it takes a different look at this. And so this is where my passion is right now, in how we can solve these problems, because these problems they're not going to be solved by one individual, even one individual organization. They're going to require collaboration. And that's what I'm really trying to help teach and preach and learn the lessons that are what works and what doesn't in this environment.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I'm very excited to see this book come out, and
Great. Well, thank you.
I'm thrilled to have you. And my commitment is to keep these interviews to 25 to 30 minutes, but otherwise I would love to keep talking. There's so much more. Maybe we can do a follow-up, maybe do a follow-up at some point, David. This was really wonderful. So I'm Jim Peacock with Peak Careers Consulting. I started my business teaching the Facilitating Career Development class, and then I've added on online discussion-based seminars. So these are like mini college online classes. They're asynchronous, so there's no set time to be in, but we focus for 5 weeks on a variety of different topics. And I don't run them until I have 4 to 10 people. So they're not independent studies. They're really discussion-based. So you're networking, you're learning from each other on a variety of topics. And I do workshops. Back in the old days, I did them face-to-face. And actually, we're looking forward to doing some more face-to-face. I've done a number of them online. Also provide individual career coaching, author of the Field Guide for Career Practitioners. And actually, at the end of this month, I should have this book out, The Adventure of Finding Me in New Zealand. I took a year off after grad school in '83 and traveled and spent most of my time in New Zealand, and actually got caught in a flash flood in the fjords, and saw my life pass before my eyes, and the white light at the end of the tunnel, the whole thing. That book's coming out. I'll have that out at the end of the month. But if you're a career practitioner or someone who delivers career services, feel free to sign up to get my weekly career emails. And you'll also get the top 10 tips of working with an undecided person. And feel free to connect with me on any of these places. Most active on LinkedIn. Listen, David, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, very informative.
My pleasure.
I can't wait to see your book.
Thank you, Jim. It was a pleasure to be with you.